out of here in time. All right, so welcome to Transitions. I think Joy just asked a question. No, Joy, we can't hear you.
We're in webinar mode, so
we don't hear or see anyone.
But we'll be at. I mean, we can allow you to speak later on. So if you do have any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat, and we can also unmute you later on. But we want this to be as interactive as possible. So, okay. Oh no, we haven't heard anything on your side. So.
Awesome. All right. So welcome everyone. It is Friday, April 30th. Cherished Mandy, Sam, and I are very excited that you have joined us this afternoon for the transition series. When we created this series, we really wanted to capture all of the phases that a business goes through. So from the birth of the idea to ultimately selling it and then figuring out what you do after you sell it. So this is session number 2, and session number 2 is covering the growth of a business. And today, each of us is going to be talking about what it is to grow your business, what that looks like based on, estate planning, business planning, business succession, looking at how that might affect your retirement and the business growth itself, and then, the mindset that comes from having a business growth. So to kick things off, Mandy is actually going to be answering our first series of questions here. So if you haven't met Mandy yet, Mandy Rollins is a leadership and performance coach, and she works with very successful physicians. Like, I'm talking world-renowned female neurosurgeons. Like, she's just a rock star, and she makes a huge difference for them, which allows them to make a difference for the rest of us, which is huge. She also works with lawyers and business owners to help them navigate transitions in their careers and in their lives. Her clients report improved performance, stronger relationships, and an increased feeling of well-being. So, Mandy, question number 1 is to you. What are the most common limiting beliefs that business owners have? And then, if you do have it, how do you change it? How do you get out of that sort of thing that happens to us, that circling, that spinning that happens?
Yes. And it's so important, kind of both of those pieces that you just asked around the, how do I notice it? And then what do I actually do about it to change it? So from my experience, every business owner, and actually every human being, creates these stories in our mind about how our life in business should be. So we can get very judgmental of ourselves. We can start judging others, and oftentimes judge our circumstances when we're creating all of these different stories. So I include myself in here too as a business owner, we tend to beat ourselves up for making mistakes or not closing a deal. We spend that time ruminating over a client that we maybe judge to be ridiculous, or difficult to work with, or maybe a team member said something, that really irritated us. And then we also can blame our circumstances for feeling unfulfilled. It's kind of that, it's kind of like an I'll be happy when game that we play. So creating these stories in our mind, like, okay, I'll be happy when I have 40 clients, or I'll be happy when I make $500,000 a year. And the problem is, once we hit that mark, then the stakes get higher. Like, we say, okay, well, it wasn't actually 40 clients that was going to make us happy. It's 65 clients, or it's not exactly $500,000. Actually, it's $700,000. So we fall into this trap of listening to that judge, where we're judging ourselves, we're judging others, and we're judging our circumstances. So with that being said, there are really 3 big limiting beliefs that I often see when I'm working with clients. So the first limiting belief is that everything has to be done exactly the way that I want it. So I am the only one who can do all the things in my business. And that is not true, especially as you're looking to grow. If you want to grow your business, it is important to be able to hire people to do the things that aren't your strengths, or that take you away from the activities that are actually generating revenue in your business. And don't get me wrong, it's completely 100% acceptable to have expectations for your employees of, what needs to be done, and then let those individuals figure out actually how to get that work done. The second limiting belief that we run into is this idea that to run a successful business, I need to work harder, I need to put in more hours, I need to make sacrifices in my life. Like that is the only way to be successful. And that too is not true. So most of us, most business owners are high achievers. We've always gotten things done. We're willing to put in the extra effort. We're willing to go above and beyond, but working harder and putting in longer hours and making all of these sacrifices may work in the short term, but it is just not sustainable. And then the third limiting belief, is that in order to grow my business, I must find more and more and more and more and more and more clients. Again, false. And Nermeen, I know you get this question a lot and you're often working with clients in this area, but there are strategies that you can implement that really allow you to grow without adding more and more clients to your portfolio. You could create different strategies by creating different value offerings. You could change your pricing structures. You could really work to, build deeper and stronger relationships with your current clients to get repeat business, as well as get some of those referrals. So overall, those are really the top 3 limiting beliefs that I hear. There are a lot of other ones out there. But to answer the second part of your question around what can I do to overcome these beliefs? And really the first piece is just noticing. Notice I'm having this thought. Notice I've created this story. Or even as you're telling yourself things, ask yourself, is that true? So noticing is the best place to start. And then when you notice you're having that thought, notice how do I feel when I think that? How do I feel when I think I have to get more and more and more clients in order to be successful? Is that an exciting feeling? If it is, go for it. If not, if you're feeling dread there, just notice that feeling. And then once you notice that feeling, notice how do you act when you're feeling that way? And when you take those actions, what are the results that you're getting? So one of the things that you can do from a self-coaching perspective is you can either catch yourself noticing the thought and then think, well, what is a different thought that I could have? Or sometimes it's easier to intercept the thought at the feeling level. So when you're feeling that feeling like you're frustrated, you're angry, you're upset, you're sad, ask yourself, well, what am I thinking that's causing me to feel sad? And then you can go back and look at, how could I change my thoughts that's going to help me feel better? When I'm feeling better, I can act in a new way. And when I act in a new way, I'll probably get a different and better result, which then reinforces that new belief that you have. So that's one of the strategies that I work on with my clients in this space.
Yeah, Mandy, I love what you said about self-coaching. And for those of us who are football fans out there, I guess you're looking for an interception or a fumble on the bad thought, right? You're wanting it to just sort of fall and go by the wayside so that, you can just leave it there. And then when new stuff comes up, then you can work on it. But you're really just looking for a fumble or an interception.
Yes. And I think the other thing there's and again, not beating yourself up. So if it didn't go the way you wanted it, okay, that's fine. Learn from it and move forward. So it's when we get into that pattern of trying something, getting down on ourselves, beating ourselves up, that's kind of the cycle that we really want to look to break.
Yeah, that's awesome, Mandy. Thank you so much for that. Now, the next question that does come up when you're growing your business is, what do you do and how do you protect yourself legally, right? So by way of introduction, Cherish Dela Cruz is an estate planning attorney, and she's also a business succession attorney. She's licensed in both Florida and Georgia. And she works with families and business owners on creating and planning their legacy. Now, Cherish, a lot of times in business growth, right? The what Mandy alluded to was, you know, you're doing a lot of work yourself, so maybe you want to bring someone on. Now, what if this business owner wants to bring on a partner? How should they protect themselves legally?
Well, definitely. I mean, I think there's always, as you're growing and as you're trying to develop that business, people may approach you, or, you thought of your friend who wants to be your business partner. They've seen how successful you have come and how you are up until this point. And so really one thing that I think is key in that is making sure you have, if you are going to bring on a partner, and that is something where you need to make sure that your vision is aligned with that partnership, just generally touching on what Mandy said, but then also making sure that you're protected. Everything is great and fine and dandy as you are courting each other. Because I want you to think of a business partnership as a marriage. It's the same type of situation where you should try it out, or even do joint venture work together prior to actually making a commitment. Because some business divorces, and so, I want you to think of a business divorce as, you no longer want to run the business together, can be nastier than a regular divorce. And so one way that you can protect yourself is making sure that you have some type of operating agreement that either addresses that. If you have a LLC, then it would be in the operating agreement, or you can have your own separate standalone buy-sell agreement. Now, a buy-sell agreement is going to be a little bit more comprehensive, and a buy-sell agreement is going to contemplate things like business divorce, if you do have other partners or other shareholders that are buying into your business. So, what happens after you pass away? You don't want to be in a position where you have to be working with that other person's either heirs or spouse in that business that you and your partner have developed. Or disability. I think a lot of people, have started thinking a lot about it. I have had a lot of business owners approach me in the last year where we've worked on either refining or developing a buy-sell agreement, because they've realized, okay, this person's getting older in light of COVID. They're really trying to get things in place. And for the first time, they're looking at their own mortality and what might potentially happen. And, I try to say, let's be proactive as possible. The last thing that you don't want to do is to contemplate all of this stuff. And if you don't contemplate it, then the business, which you have worked so hard on and for so long, that's your, baby, can, essentially, the value of it could go down significantly if you have to sell because of one of these reasons. Or if you do bring on a partner and you just want out, how do those shares, or how does everything get transferred? So definitely a buy-sell agreement, operating agreement, or a shareholder agreement, which addresses all of those things.
That's excellent, Cherish. Yeah, I mean, don't go drinking with your business partners and make any handshake deals.
I totally agree with that.
Situation you want to be in.
Yeah, and there is a starting point, like, and you also have to think about that too, like where you were 5, 10 years ago, 20 years ago is different than where you are now. And so it may be, you're like, oh, well, no, Joe is always going to be my best friend. He's going to win. But what happens if Joe's no longer there? I mean, he can't, in terms of the football terms, like he can't be, the interceptor and do all of those things for you. So you will have to deal with his heir or his spouse or whoever he leaves that to.
Mm-hmm. Well, and Cherish, we've had, I've got clients right now that are going through that more on the divorce side. And like you said, it can get really, really ugly. So yeah, these guys were in each other's weddings, and one of them is now suing the other one for what they're arguing, because they had an operating agreement put in place, but they never signed it. They
Right.
never finalized it. They kept going back and forth, and they just didn't get it done, regardless of how much their attorneys, how much their wealth management team was telling them to get it signed, right? Before, something happens. And if you guys don't want to work together, really, we were more worried about somebody passing away, because these guys are older and in their 60s. So you just never know, especially when there's money involved. It can get really ugly, but it can also be very amicable if it is done right and done properly, when emotions are not part of the equation when it's written.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Sam. I mean, I think just like estate planning, you need to try to take the emotion out of it when you're not experiencing the emotion, because that's when litigation fees go up, because you're just fighting over things that you shouldn't necessarily be fighting over. And even if you just have a basic starting point, that's better than nothing. And so that is something I definitely want to emphasize, just because, as advisors, all of us have experienced that and seen the outcome of what happens when those things aren't put in place.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, are there other agreements that you think that, business owners should have to protect them at the growth stage specifically?
Yes, definitely. I mean, I work a lot with service-based businesses. So making sure you have a robust client agreement, something that doesn't scare the client away, but that outlines the clear expectations of what you as the service provider, what you're going to do, and then what the client's responsibilities are. Paying you on time, making sure that that if you have a trust account, that trust account is replenished at a certain time. But once things are memorialized in a contract, then you, not only from protecting yourself as well, but you outline who has which responsibility, and there's no confusion. And just like that similar analogy of the handshake, it's great to have a handshake and believe that your client's going to pay you, but making sure that that's put in place. Other things that you may be thinking about as you are growing are protecting that confidential or proprietary information that may be essential to your growing business. So if you have a unique process for delivering a product or a service, that's proprietary information that should be protected, because someone can, if it's not outlined, someone can take that information and run away with it and start their own business. And so that's something that you want to think about. And also in terms of vendor agreements, making sure that vendor agreements are in place and that you're actually looking at them, and not just signing on the dot, which I know that some business owners do. And then making sure that if you have a key employee, having those incentives in a employment agreement or an incentive package. As your business develops and it grows, those are key considerations where you're like, again, outlining duties and responsibilities, but making it sure. And then also that employee who may be key to your business growth, and key to your business value, understands that they are valued and this is the compensation that they're receiving.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So that is a lot of stuff that you need to protect yourself, but trust me and trust Cherish, like when you don't have those things in place, it can get really ugly really fast, because if in a divorce, people are going to spend thousands of dollars on an ugly vase, imagine what they'll spend on a business that's making, lots of money. So yeah. And, when it comes to finding the right kind of attorney for stuff like this, you want someone who's going to be warm and knowledgeable, like Cherish, because, you want them to be able to see like both sides of the conversation and not be pushy on one side or the other. So definitely make sure that it's a personality fit. And
Yeah.
there's definitely someone who can like fit many personalities.
Thank you. I appreciate
Definitely
that.
we're looking for someone. Okay, so Sam, I know you started talking a little bit more about some of these scary situations that come up, right? That you might have some partnerships and now they're suing each other because they didn't sign the agreement and all of those things. So, by way of introduction, Sam is a wealth management advisor with Northwestern Mutual. She joined Northwestern Mutual in 1999 after becoming a mom in 2009. She followed her passion to help professionals juggle demanding family and leadership roles. Her mission is to help purpose-driven, highly taxed business owners, women physicians, business professionals, and their families create and implement an integrated financial plan to save strategically and manage debt efficiently to achieve meaningful goals while protecting and growing wealth. So, Sam, I know one of the questions that comes up a lot when business owners are growing their business is, how are you leveraging the business to support the personal financial goals and the personal security goals that the individual might have outside of being a business owner?
Sure. So we'll switch from some of that scary talk that Cherish was alluding to, even though it's really important, um, and go into more of the personal financial goals. So remember, there's two sides to the financial planning coin. One is the defense of that plan, okay, which is more of some of the things that Cherish was talking about, right? So when life gets tough or business gets tough or things don't go as great or people get difficult, we've got to make sure we've got a good defense game on that. So a lot of that's the legal side. And then the other side of that coin is the offense, which is the more fun stuff to talk about, right? So we're making money, and now what do we do with that to make sure we can continue to make money? But then also, what do we do with that to make sure we're going to hit our financial goals in the future? So real quickly on the defense side, just to complement what Cherish was talking about is, we've got to have those plans in place, those legal agreements, but we also have to fund them. So if we have a buy-sell agreement that says, okay, our business that is worth $5 million, it's just for simplicity, it's owned 50-50 by two partners. If we say, hey, okay, great, we're gonna, if you pass away, I'm gonna buy out your spouse of your shares so that I own this $5 million business all on my own. Well, there's probably not $2.5 million worth of cash sitting around to buy that person out, right? And so, especially if we don't have a ton of liquidity personally or inside the business, we just need to have funding mechanisms to fund that $2.5 million. So a lot of the work that we do will be, working alongside attorneys like Cherish to make sure those buy-sell agreements and those operating agreements are appropriate, and then we have to fund them. And a lot of times that's an insurance solution. When it comes to survivor, it's usually a life insurance policy. There's special kind of disability insurance that protects business owners in that specific situation, right? So it's not the same type of business disability insurance that you would buy to protect your income. It really protects your shares, right? So if anybody has that bridge to cross, that's a pretty in-depth conversation, but it's really built to pay out that claim if a business owner, like I had a situation where one of my clients owned a dental practice with another dentist, and the other dental owner ended up having a disability and couldn't continue practicing. And they did not have that insurance in place at all for him. And so he wanted out and he wanted his money. And so they had to buy him out. And when he was disabled without insurance, and they had to go to the bank and get a loan. And it was a big struggle financially. They couldn't pay themselves for another couple of years because they had to do that. They had to take their salaries and buy him out. And it was really tough. So that's just an example, but it's just important. So it's usually, really, so get the legal documentation done, but also just make sure you've got the funding mechanisms in place to protect that asset, because it is an asset. And it can disrupt some of your personal financial planning from there. So let's get on to the fun stuff. The fun stuff, being the offense side, is okay, great. This business is now making money. I'm paying myself. I'm able to hire employees. And now what, right? What do we do with some of these profits? And so a lot of that work beyond the risk management is wealth accumulation. So the business is helping us build wealth, but we don't want to keep all of that wealth tied up into that business, right? Especially if we're already paying taxes on it. So a lot of times what we will see clients do is start establishing investment and savings plans and leveraging that business to do so. So a lot of times we can run retirement plans through the business that are more advantageous than individual plans, and allow us to deduct more of our taxable income, right? So it's just basically we're saving some of that money for ourselves instead of sending it all off to the IRS. So if we can send a smaller check to the IRS and keep some of that for ourselves, that'll be good. We can also build in some of those plans, if we have employees, can actually help with the retention of those employees. A lot of educated, highly qualified people, they want to be able to save for retirement. We're all on our own in that sense, right? We know Social Security is most likely not going to cover our lifestyles ever. And so we're going to need to make sure we've got savings outside of that. So having a retirement plan that, again, helps us with tax deduction as the owner is really, really helpful. So there's different types just depending on how your business is structured. And then you also can leverage even benefits. So health insurance, disability income coverage, right? If we can, I have some clients who, like chiropractors, it's really hard for chiropractors to get disability insurance. But we can get it to them from a group plan perspective. So if we insure all of the employees, including the chiropractor, it's cheaper, and it also allows that practitioner to have some insurance. And then it's figuring out, okay, now that we've got this potentially income stream or distributions that we may be able to take from the business, how can we now take that and diversify it away from the business to grow our wealth? Okay, and so then that's usually a discussion around personally, what are the retirement goals? What are the education goals for the kids? What are the lifestyle increased goals, or whatever it might be? What do we want to give and to our church or to our community? What do we want to accomplish with this extra money? And then figuring out those strategies to then save and allocate and really put that money to work outside the business. So that if the business has a year or 2 or 5 that aren't very profitable, or if we have some disruption, if your personal balance sheet is stable and good and healthy, it's actually going to help your business limp through that time a little bit better. It's also going to allow you to have access to credit. And just another note, and this is more probably a CPA question, but we get this a lot because I have clients that'll want to buy a house, or they'll want to buy the property that their business is on, but their CPA is saying that they only make $40,000 a year on paper. So we've got to be careful, right? So sometimes it's better to show that we're making a little bit more money so that we can get access to credit if we know we need it. So the business can be leveraged in a lot of great ways. And so working with someone who financially understands what's going on in the business and how we can leverage that from a tax perspective and from an efficiency perspective to meet personal goals is really important.
Yeah. I hope what everyone is getting from this conversation is that everything is connected, right? Like everything in your business affects something else in your business. And you can't just take the money out and go and buy a Ferrari. I mean, you can, but it may not be the best option for your business. And so I completely agree with you, Sam. I think you made some really great, really valid points. And it's interesting that these points are being made like on April 30th, when, you know, taxes are due in 17 days, right? For at least most of the United States, with the exception of Texas. So, you know, it's an interesting time. And if you find yourself, you know, having to pay out more than you want to, then consider not buying the Ferrari and getting some disability instead, or investing into an IRA or something else for your business. Okay, so to wrap things up, I have the pleasure of going last. And by way of introduction, you guys should already know me yet. My name is Nermeen Jasani. I'm a business consultant. I work with doctors and lawyers exclusively. That is, you know, the bulk of my business practice. And what I focus on is, you know, Mandy is the coach, I am the consultant, right? So I'm looking at the numbers, I'm looking at the strategy, and more important than strategy is the execution of the strategy. So a lot of us oftentimes will have ideas, we're going to sit down and do this massive strategy planning, and then we never actually execute it. So I'm there for the strategy and the execution piece of it. Now, one of the most common questions that I get for business owners who are willing to part with at least some of their responsibilities, right? Like they're willing to hire other people. The question I get is, who do you hire? How do you hire? When do you hire? Right now, it's a little bit of a confusing question, but I'm going to start with this sort of overall disclaimer. Hiring is really hard. Like, it is not easy. So please don't take it personally if you have to go through a lot of people before you find the right fit, and don't let that sort of discourage you from, you know, assigning off responsibility so that you can focus on the things that you're really good at, right? As a general rule of thumb, you know, you're only going to be good at a handful of things, right? So when you are looking to hire someone, ideally look for someone who doesn't have the same exact skills that you have, who can sort of come in and be the person who can complement you the most, who has the skills that you don't have. So if you're a people person but you're not a numbers person, consider bringing on a numbers person, right? And also know that numerically you might have to go through a few people before you find someone who's going to be the right fit for your business. The other thing I would say is make sure that you are seriously clear about who you want to bring on. And by that, I mean actually write out a job description, because what happens oftentimes with business owners is they think they want X. They think they want, you know, an admin who can also do some big bookkeeping, who can also do social media. But in reality, those are like three different roles. And like, there is no one human being who can do all three of those roles well. There's a human being who can do one of those roles really well, and then you'll need to hire other people for those additional roles. So, you know, just keep in mind that contractors are totally okay. You can use contractors, just make sure that they are actually legally contractors and not employees, because you don't want to get in trouble with the IRS on that. And, you know, what I usually say is the biggest thing that I see business owners doing wrong, and I've seen so many businesses go out of business because of this, is that they started making a whole bunch of money really fast, and they were like, we need to hire, and then they expanded too fast, and then they all of a sudden have this incredible overhead expense that they didn't have, that they didn't plan for, and now they're just like burning through money, right? Like, they've got, you know, a large office space, they've got payroll of 20 every month, and then you hit a slow month, and then things all of a sudden start to look really scary. So what I always like to say is, if you're going to hire, make sure for every role that you bring on, you have at least 6 months of salary for that person. Because I see business owners having this conversation. Am I going to pay myself, or am I going to pay my staff this week? It should never come to that, right? It should be that everybody gets paid, because we've planned for growth and we have, you know, made it this way. And so what I always say is, like, just take some time. You probably do need someone spend extra time looking for someone. And the rule of thumb is, hire slow, fire fast, right? So use that 6 months. When you know that you need someone, let that be your 6-month clock to start saving for that role. Start looking for someone specifically. Look, in the meantime, you're going to be stressed, you're going to be overwhelmed, you're going to be wondering why you're doing this. But when you hit a point when things get slow, you're going to be so thankful that you had some money saved aside for that new staff member that you have, so that you can pay them and you don't have to worry about not paying yourself, right? Because, as your business starts to grow, you're going to have additional expenses that come along the way. You're going to be hiring Cherish. You're going to be working with Sam to, make sure you've got disability and you've got, an IRA and insurance set up for your business and your employees. And then you're going to want to work with someone like Mandy who can help you become a better leader and, present yourself, in a certain way to your clients and to your team. So all of those expenses start to increase as you go along in your business. And as long as you are appropriately projecting those increases and you know that those are expenses that are going to be coming in, like that is a much stronger place to be in than, okay, I grew really fast, I hired all these people, now I have to fire all of these people. It's sort of like what happened to WeWork, right? Like they kept taking on all of these expenses, but then they would go out and borrow more money against those expenses. It was just not a good situation to be in. So lesson is, don't be one of those business owners, right? Take your time when you're growing, make sure that you are like bringing on the right people. And it's okay if it's slow, and it's also okay if they leave you. Like, better off that they leave you than you like cling on to people who are just not going to be a good fit for your business and for, ultimately your, nest egg, right? Because that's what a lot of business owners do with their business itself. So I'd like to open it up to the participants right now. If you have any questions, you are more than welcome to pop them in the chat. If you have comments, if you have scary stories that you have seen yourself, we would love to hear that. And if Cherish or Mandy, you have any other comments as well, you're welcome to share at this point.
I was just looking in the chat. I don't see anything there.
So one of the questions that we had received ahead of time was, so if you are growing just from a mindset perspective and you do have a stumble, so, usually you're in growth mode, everything's great, you're uber focused. And later on, you don't hit your numbers. So you're feeling very sad as a, and just as we all know, being an entrepreneur can be very much like a roller coaster ride. How do you handle those shifts and your mindset as, as your business ebbs and flows?
Yes, as your business will ebb and flow, as we all know our businesses ebb and flow. Cherish, I think it's an interesting question. There are a number of things that you can, routines and habits that you can get into in your business so that you are constantly looking at what's going well. So if you set up and decide, okay, every Friday I am going to just jot down, what were the 5 celebrations for the week? Like, what were 5 amazing things that happened? Or some people keep a journal of what's going well. So that's kind of a thinking of Sam saying, you've got an offense and a defense. You can do some of those proactive strategies to focus on the good things. And when you're in those situations where you are feeling down, where you are feeling sad, you made a mistake in hiring. I think the first thing is giving yourself a little bit of grace, not being so hard on yourself, not beating yourself up, and then really looking at it from the perspective of like, what's the gift here? What did I learn? If you made a mistake, maybe you lost a client or you weren't able to close a deal. Instead of taking that personally and deciding you're terrible or whatever it is, think about, what did I learn from that conversation? What do I want to do differently next time? So really looking for kind of the gifts uh, from the adversity is another way that you can help kind of get yourself out of that slump, and then get back ready to go again.
Yeah, I love that.
Thank you.
Stefan.
That was awesome.
That's so great.
There is another question, and thank you, Carmen. But how often do you think business owners should look at our personal finances? Should it be a quarterly review, but then also looking at your own salary in terms of, how often should that be assessed?
I can take that one. And Nermeen, from a salary perspective, you may have some other insight on that. But from a personal finance, it's always good. There's so much to look at for personal finance. Quarterly, I don't think is bad, right? As long as the bills are getting paid and, at least somebody's, just making sure all of that's getting done on a monthly basis. But as far as kind of assessing it, I think that, quarterly is pretty healthy. A lot of times, just depending on how deep you're going with that. If you're looking at budgeting, you're looking at, okay, how are we spending? It does make sense to look at that on a monthly basis if that's a concern. And most people don't live on a budget. If you're not a budget person, then don't start that habit, as long as you're not overspending, right? But for a lot of business owners, when it comes to, hey, what I was talking about before is how much should we be saving or moving, out of the business to be saved somewhere else. A lot of times we're looking at that on quarterly, probably at the most, but at least twice a year, just to see, especially if we're going to have big changes that year, right? If income growth or business growth has gone up dramatically, then it does make sense to make sure we're looking at it. And a lot of times you're working to at least quarterly with a CPA to see what's the profit and loss and how is it looking, right? Because cash flow is going to be huge as far as making sure we can make ends meet, especially if we have better quarters than others. And so, hopefully I've answered that question. And then I usually don't see salaries change that much. So I don't see people, continuing to raise their salary. Now, granted, your taxable income may go up, right? But that's really more so a function of the profitability of the business. And the CPAs, they're not going to want to change that too quickly or too often. Nermeen, do you have anything else to add to that?
Yeah, just a couple comments. So I'm sure Mandy will agree here too, but as a business owner, like you are the leader and the CEO and the CFO, and usually a lot of other C hats that you've gotten in place. So what I usually say is you're responsible for giving yourself a promotion, right? Like so often as business owners, like you will get the same number and you will stick to it. And then you feel like, okay, I'm working so hard, but like, what's my upside? Like, what am I really getting from this? I'm just running this business so I can pay the mortgage and send the kids to school. Like, what am I doing all of this for? And so I say that to say, like, you still have to take care of yourself like you were an employee. Like if you worked at a corporate job, you would get a yearly bonus, right? Or, whenever your bonus time would come around, make sure you're taking care of yourself in that way too, because it will greatly relieve like this stress that you might feel from time to time when it comes to being a business owner. So that's just like rule number one, make sure you're taking care of yourself. If the business finances allow for you to give yourself a promotion, by all means, you deserve it, give it to yourself, right? Now, the next comment that I'll make is I see a lot of solo business owners using their business to then also fuel, their retirement, whether it's through a SEP or through some other vehicle. So from a purely IRS standpoint, you want to make sure that if your business income, like you're taking out like a short shareholder interest, for example, like $500,000, but you're only paying yourself $12,000 a year, like, because you don't want to pay that much in taxes, like the IRS is going to come and look at that. And that's like a huge red flag for them. So when it comes to your own salary, make sure you're having that conversation with your CPA and saying, okay, like what percentage of my like shareholder interest, of my owner interest should I be, taking out as my salary so that I'm appropriately taxing myself, right? And that's just the only thing that I'll add to that is just be careful to make sure that you're not, taking out 500,000, but only paying yourself 12 on paper, right? Which is what Sam alluded to earlier is you want to make sure that on paper you're showing that you are creditworthy. And one of the ways of doing that is to show a higher income level, of course. Anything else that anyone else wanted to add in? Any other questions? Carmen, that was a really great question. I'm glad that we were able to really tackle that.
Mhm.
I don't see anything else in the chat, Nermeen.
Okay. I mean, I know that we wanted to keep it sort of shorter and keep everyone here for 45 minutes because it is lunchtime and we want you guys to be able to come in and out and head back to work because you're all busy and we understand that. And it's Friday, so, maybe you'll be able to start your weekend a little bit earlier. But, I think we can wrap it up here if no one has any questions. And you can always reach out to any of us. We are more than happy to answer your questions. If you're a little shy and you don't want to put it in the chat, that's totally okay. I'm sure you can pull us aside and send any of us a LinkedIn message or an email, and we'll be more than happy to help you out because I know for a fact all of us are here to serve you and to make your lives easier in whatever way that we can. So please do not hesitate to reach out to us. And thank you so much for being here on Friday. And, I hope that everyone has a wonderful, wonderful weekend.
Yes. Thank you everyone for being here.
Thank you. And just a reminder, we're going to be back together again next week on Wednesday at 12:30. And we're going to be focusing on preparing to sell your business, which apparently I'm learning is something you need to do at the beginning in order to get ready to do that toward the end. So even if you're like, I'm not going to be selling my business for a very long time, it's going to be a very important session. So We'll see you next Wednesday.
All right.
Yes.
Thanks.
Next Wednesday. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.